Welcome to Lyte Talks. My name is Nikema Lyte, licensed clinical social worker, and you have just tuned in to a topic that I've been dying, well, maybe not dying, but really longing, desiring, yearning to talk about, and that is healthy boundaries. You know that I'm passionate about relational intelligence, and boundaries in relationships are just essential to relational intelligence. And I'm just super excited to start this as a new series. So make sure you stay tuned for each and every video that I'll be putting out in regards to different areas and boundaries. Today, we're going to talk about what are boundaries and why do we need healthy boundaries in our relationships. I love this quote by Dharius. He often talks about putting people in their place. Now, each one of us have relationships that are different, and each relationship has different proximity to us in terms of access and closeness. Those are just fancy words for boundaries. So make sure you stay tuned until the end. I'm also going to be providing some really helpful resources to be able to help you on your journey of relational intelligence. It's time to get down to healthy boundaries. Good morning! Okay, so let's get right into this. What are boundaries? Now, an amazing author and teacher, Dr. Henry Cloud, often says boundaries are simply property lines, right? A line that marks the limit of an area and deems what's acceptable or unacceptable within a relationship. Boundaries help us determine how we want to see and how we want to experience ourselves and others within a relationship. I hope you're taking notes because this is important stuff. Boundaries help us protect our emotional bank accounts. Some aspects of boundaries within your relationships could be your time, your finances or resources, your gifts or talents, your space, your physical space, your emotional or mental capacity, right? And there's several other areas, but I want us to focus on these aspects of boundaries and relationships. Again, your time, your finances and resources, your gifts and your talents, your space, and your emotional and mental capacity. Part 2 is, why do we need boundaries within our relationships? Well, first and foremost, because I want to keep my sanity and I don't want to go to prison. Yeah, that's a good reason. If we don't establish where the property line is, people encroach upon our property. And that can cause us discomfort, frustration, annoyance, emotional pain. But it's important for us to not only establish the boundary, but communicate it. Okay? If it's not said, it's as if it's not even there. Let's talk. There's certain types of people. We'll talk about 2 categories today: batteries and vacuums. I know you all know them, and some of you are them, right? A battery is someone that when you speak with them, when you interact with them, when you spend time with them over the phone or physically in person, you feel energized, you feel empowered, you feel encouraged. That's a battery. And those types of relationships are super important for us to have in our lives. There's also vacuums. Now, what do vacuums do? They suck. Dad joke. Okay, I'm sorry. Vacuums are also known as VDPs, or very draining people. These types of people, you know them, some of you are them, where they take from you in the interactions, whether it be on the phone, in person. When they spend time with you, you leave often feeling drained, exhausted, irritable. Now, I want us to understand that we have relationships with both of these categories, and I don't really know if it's going to be avoidable, but it's important to be able to know how to establish boundaries and know how to communicate them. Another reason why it's super important to have healthy boundaries in relationships is a concept that I've spoken about before in my video on navigating rejection: the praise and the rejection of man. What do I mean by that? Each one of us in our lives experience praise, acknowledgement, approval, all of that good, amazing compliment type of experiences, as well as rejection: being ignored, being left unseen, being neglected, unheard, misunderstood. The praise and the rejection of man for someone that does not have healthy boundaries could either boost up their ego if they're constantly getting the praise, or send them down a well of despair and discouragement when they receive the rejection. And the goal for healthy boundaries is to be able to experience praise and experience rejection and remain deeply rooted and planted, not swayed by either one of them. So I think it's super important to be able to understand where those property lines belong when we're experiencing praise and rejection. But another important reason for us to have healthy boundaries is because I've seen, experienced, and even done for myself ways in which we think of and interpret love in ways that are distorted and unhealthy. Ways that we think of as believers, as Christians, people of faith, where we love and we serve, and we equate that with all access, no boundaries, saying yes and never saying no. It's unhealthy. You hear me? We need to stop. So it's super important to be able to have boundaries as well as love and be able to connect with others. You know, we're called to love everyone, but keep in mind, not everyone's treated the same. It may seem harsh or unchristian like to say that I love everyone, but not everyone's treated the same. But let's look at the facts, okay? The way that I interact with my husband is not going to be the same way I interact with my coworker, my mother, my brother in Christ. All of these relationships have different roles in my life, and I'm going to interact with, treat each person dependent upon the role. All of them with love, but different levels of treatment, different levels of access, different levels of proximity. Okay? So we love all people, we treat people differently. Remember, one size does not fit all. So if we take a deeper look into that, we have relationships with coworkers, we have relationships with romantic partners, with friends, with business partners, with ministry leaders, with pastors. These different relationships have different responsibilities, have different roles, and we're supposed to show up in these relationships differently. The boundaries, therefore, will be different in each one of those relationships. That means in all of these relationships, I have boundaries, but the boundaries look different. You feel me? I want to give you some homework. Homework time. Write down these reflection questions, and I want you to do a self inventory. Take a check of where your boundaries lie, whether they be healthy, in the middle, not healthy, by looking at these questions. Number one, what's the most important boundary within your life? What is the most important boundary within your life? What boundary is non negotiable for you within your relationships? Number two, what types of relationships do you have the most challenge with having healthy boundaries? Now, I named the categories before: family, friends, co-workers, strangers, what have you. Think about what area do you have the most challenges with having healthy boundaries? Write it down. Number 3, are you a vacuum or a battery in the relationships that you show up in? Are you a vacuum or a battery in the relationships that you show up in? I think that it's important for us to take a self inventory because we can be a battery with our friends and be a vacuum with our spouse. So take an inventory of how you show up. What types of boundaries do you have or not have in the relationships that you have? I want you to check out the description box below. I'm also going to provide some resources to continue this journey, to continue this discussion on boundaries. There's so many amazing authors out there, speakers and teachers on boundaries. And as always, I will have the link to my merch in the description box below, okay? Because girl is a brand ambassador now. You get your coupon and you get your merch so you can be looking fly. And if you can comment also below, what questions do you have around boundaries? I'm super excited to be able to answer those questions, or you might see a video coming out soon to answer that question for you. It's been real. I love you so much, and I'll see you next time for part 2. Go forth and shine.